Alright, so welcome back to a closer look at all the cards in this game of Everdell. So, let's continue on. This is technically part 3 of showing you the critters and construction cards. Okay, so, here we have the postal pigeon and the post office, and I got them. I had a dyslexic moment. I always like to put the construction side on the left. Okay, there we go. That's better. Alright, so the post office here is going to cost you a twig, and it's going to cost you 2 resin in order to put and build into your town. Now, it is worth an extra 2 points at the end of the game, and if an opponent was to put a worker on your post office, you're going to get a point every time he puts a worker in your post office. And I should mention that I might have missed that with some of the buildings. So let me just take a quick look here. Some of the red destination cards will give you points if an opponent's worker goes there, but not all of them. And so I'm just going through them real quick out of all the ones I've gone through to see if there were any red destination cards that gave you points, or if this was the first one that showed up. Okay, so it's the first one that showed up. Never mind that. So the other red destination cards I've shown thus far, you do not get points if somebody puts a worker there. But the post office, you do. So if an opponent puts a worker in your post office, you get an extra point for that, which is kind of nice. Okay. Now, regardless of who is going to put their worker here, you'll give an opponent 2, meaning if the opponent puts a worker here, that opponent of yours is going to give an opponent 2, or perhaps you, 2 cards, and then discard any number of cards and draw up to your hand limit. So let's just, for easiness, let's just say I'm the person who put the worker down. I would give an opponent 2 cards. Then I would discard any number of cards from my hand. So I could discard them all, or just a few. And then it doesn't matter because then I could draw up to my hand limit. So I could draw until I have 8 cards, basically. So I give away 2 to an opponent, and then get rid of some other cards, and then I could get until I had 8 cards in my hand. That could be useful, and then other times it might not be so useful. So that's something to note. Alright, then the postal pigeon. If you have the post office in your town, you can put the postal pigeon in your town for free. Just don't forget to put an occupied token on this corner of the card. Now, if you don't have a post office, or decide to play the postal pigeon not for free, or if you don't have a postal office like I was saying, you'll pay 2 berries in order to play the postal pigeon. And since it is a Tan Traveler card, it is a one-time use card. So when you play this, you're actually going to reveal 2 cards from your hand, and then you may play one worth up to 3 points, meaning 3 victory points, which would be here, for free, and then discard the other. So that's really cool. It'd be a good way of discarding a card you don't really need anyways, and then you'd also get a card and you get to play it for free. So that could be very useful. If it was a critter, you could not have to worry about paying a bunch of berries. Or if it was a construction card and you didn't have the resources, the postal pigeon could come in handy for sure. So that's a pretty powerful card if you use it on certain cards. Certain cards that may not be worth using, just so you know. But that is still a very powerful card, and there are times when I have just wanted to put a postal pigeon in my town and didn't want the post office. So that's something to note. That's a pretty cool card combo. But mostly it's the postal pigeon that makes it the true success. Alright, then we have the mine, and you can't have a mine without a mole, right? We need a miner mole. And so these two go together. In order to build the mine, you need a twig, resin, and a pebble. And this is one of those green production cards, so when you play it, and then during the 2 seasons, you're going to gain a pebble, which is kind of nice. Pebbles are hard to get in this game, unless you're playing with a particular forest card that might be in the game, it's very hard to get pebbles. And so having a mine would be very lucrative for sure. And it's worth 2 points at the end of the game. And then, if you do have a mine in your town, you can play the miner mole for free. If you don't, you have to pay 3 berries in order to play the miner mole. And don't forget to put the occupied token on the mine, saying that you use the mine to put the miner mole in for free. And what the miner mole will do is it will copy one grain production card in an opponent's city. So if one of your opponents has some really good grain production cards, you can copy one of their grain production cards and do exactly what it says, but for your sake and not theirs, which is pretty awesome. Maybe theirs is gaining 2 twigs or gaining 2 berries or something like that. That could be very useful, for sure. Who knows, maybe they have a mine and you don't, and you played the miner mole. That could be useful. You could get the pebble that way, if that was the case. Either way, you could possibly do this a few times in the game. So that's pretty cool. Alright, let's move on. And remember, the miner mole is going to give you a point, and the mine is going to give you a couple extra points. Next we have the crane and the architect. These two pair up. Okay, so in order to build the crane, all you need is a pebble. Yes, all you need is a pebble. That's still very hard to get, of course, but it's very useful for sure. So this is an interesting one. It's going to be worth a point at the end of the game, but most likely you won't have a crane in your town at the end of the game. And the reason why is because it's a blue governance card, and so when you play a construction card, you may discard this crane from your city to play that construction card for 3 fewer resources of your choice. That is powerful. If that was a couple of pebbles and, you know, if the card was like 3 twigs, 2 resin, and 2 pebbles, you could take out 2 pebbles and a resin to make it a whole lot cheaper and easier to build if you had a crane in your town. That's really cool, and all you're doing is discarding this to get it. That's a powerful card. I have done that to help me out. I think I actually used the crane to help me build the clock tower once. That was awesome. And then if you have a crane in your town still, and you decide to play the architect in your town, you can play the architect for free. But if you don't play the architect for free, you're going to pay 4 berries in order to play the architect. And if you do play it for free, don't forget to put the occupied token on the crane. If you still have the crane, that is. But the architect is going to be worth 2 points at the end of the game. Plus, it's going to be worth 1 extra point for each of your unused resin and pebbles to a maximum of 6. So if you had, I don't know, 4 resin and 2 pebbles, you could get 6 points, but that would be the maximum you could get is 6 points. So if you had more pebbles and more resin, you wouldn't be able to get more points. So that is something to note. So that is a very powerful card on its own, and the crane on its own is a very powerful card, for sure. All right, let's continue on, since we're still on a roll here. Okay, next we have the inn, and it's one of those red destination cards with 2 victory points. In order to build it, you're going to need 2 twigs and a resin. And then it has that open sign on it, so if an opponent's worker goes here, you're going to get an extra point for the end of the game. But when you place a worker down in this location at the inn, you can play a critter or a construction from the meadow for 3 resources fewer. That's pretty powerful. So if there's a card here in the middle you want to play, you could put a worker down here to play it for 3 resources fewer. So that's pretty interesting. And so you're actually placing a worker in order to place a card if you're placing the worker here at the inn. That's pretty powerful. Then, of course, if you have the inn, you can play the innkeeper for free. Now, if you don't have the inn, you're going to have to pay 1 berry in order to play the innkeeper. Wow, just 1 berry. That's not too bad, is it? But you can only play 1 innkeeper in your city at a time, obviously. So, because it is a unique critter. Now, here's what's interesting about the innkeeper. Even though it's only worth a point at the end of the game, there's a good chance you probably will not have the innkeeper in your town at the end of the game. And here's why. When playing a critter, you may discard this innkeeper from your city to decrease the cost by 3 berries. That's powerful. So obviously you don't want to, you're probably not going to want to use the innkeeper to play a critter that's only worth 2 berries to put in your town. But for 3 or more berries, this is very powerful for sure. That is awesome. So if it was 3 berries, you get to play a critter for free. Awesome, right? And if it was more than 3 berries, like the doctor's worth 4 berries, right? Well, that would be very useful and make it much easier and worthwhile to play the doctor for sure. So that's awesome. I like the innkeeper a lot. So that's another one of those blue governance cards. Awesome. Sweet. Let's continue on. Okay, let's do at least one more of these cards, these pairs. Okay, next we have the Resin Refinery and the Chip Sweep, and these are paired together. Okay, in order to build a Resin Refinery, you're going to need a resin and a pebble to build it. And because it's one of those green production cards, it's going to let you gain 1 resin during the time you play it and during the 2 seasons that you prepare for. So that's pretty nice and useful. And it's worth a point at the end of the game. Then, if you have the Resin Refinery, you can play the Chip Sweep for free. And the Chip Sweep is worth 2 points. But if you don't play the Chip Sweep for free, it's going to cost you 3 berries in order to play. So if you do end up playing it for free, don't forget to put an occupied token there. Same goes for all the other cards that are building constructions that work with certain critters. Now, for this one, you'll activate 1 green production in your city. So if you have a Chip Sweep in your town, you get to activate 1 additional green production in your city, basically, for having one of these in your city. So that's pretty useful if you need a particular something. Like, oh, I don't know, the mine produces a pebble, and the pebbles are really hard to get sometimes, so if you had a mine in your town, your Chip Sweep could activate the mine again, giving you another pebble. So that's pretty powerful for sure. Alright, we'll continue on in the next video.